for the second group of presenters today. Our first presenter in this group is Neal McLoughlin, who oversees wildlife management and planning and intelligence and coordinates risk-based planning for Alberta agriculture and forestry. Since 2005, he's done this since 2005, working in 10 forest management areas or forest districts. Neal also leads the development of several national fire models and chairs the Canadian Wildland Fire Simulation Modeling course. Neal started as an Alberta junior forest ranger and then on to Parks Canada in Jasper National Park. He's worked with prescribed burns, wildlife, wildfires, vegetation management, and his career with the Government of Alberta started in 2005 after his BSc in Environmental and Conservation Sciences. The title of Neal's talk is Landscapes on Fire. So take it away, Neal. Looks like you're there.
Thank you, Vic, and good morning, everyone. So Landscapes on Fire. In 1992, Alberta signed the National Forest Accord, and it defined sustainable forest management as part of Canada's National Forest Strategy. Now, we should consider that the paradigm of the time, and so this presentation is perhaps a storyline in terms of how we did, but with a particular lens focused on fire and fire across the Alberta landscape. So I'm going to take you through a storyline which basically traces out my career, which started in 2000 through to last year, 2019, and we're going to look at it in 4 5-year time periods. So this first time period was when I was rapidly acquiring knowledge about fire. I was completing my Bachelor of Science at U of A. I was working at Parks Canada in Jasper, learning about fire, learning how to do prescribed burns and suppress fires. There were some significant events that occurred through this period of time. There was the Chisholm fire in 2001. It destroyed, a couple homes and on the landscape. It got to be about just over 100,000 hectares. That spurred some FireSmart work. The FireSmart Homeowners Manual was created as a result of that fire. Greater emphasis on community protection. That year was followed in 2002 by the Horse River fire, and it was double the size of the Chisholm. It was over 200,000 hectares, and it became the second largest fire in Alberta's recorded history. So there was a continued emphasis on wildland-urban interface protection and planning, and we identified 3 zones, and the third zone was a landscape FireSmart zone. And the intent of that zone was to prevent large catastrophic fires from spreading into communities, and that was to be accomplished through manipulating cutting patterns or establishing control lines in the vegetation that could be used in suppression operations to prevent the spread of a fire. The next year in 2003, we saw the Lost Creek fire in Blairmore. And that year, the Partners in Protection produced the second version of the FireSmart community manual for protecting communities against wildfire. And by the end of that period, we had 32 FireSmart plans in various stages of implementation in the province. The next period would suggest that we were heading in a good path. The graph that you're looking at is showing the total hectares burned in the province during that time period, and it would suggest that things were looking up. The province was actively investing in prescribed burn operations to address spreading mountain pine beetle in the province. But there were some subtle indicators, and the one that I'll emphasize here, it occurred in 2006, which on this graph doesn't seem like a very large annual area burn, but we saw 2 large fires in the Wilmore Wilderness. One of them was just over 14,000 hectares, and the other close to 21,000 hectares. And those 2 fires combined resulted in 4.7 times the total area burned in that protected area in the previous 45 years. So although on their own they don't seem that large, there was this subtle hint that, you know, things were changing, and in a much greater way than what we had seen in the past. Let's fast forward to 2010 to 2014. Basically, from this point forward, folks, everything was record setting, and really none of the training that I had taken, what I had learned in school, applied. Everything was new territory. We were setting records for wind speeds experienced during fires, drought codes, rates of spread, area burned, number of import resources from around the world, suppression expenditures, community evacuations, insurance claims, uninsurable loss faced by communities and held with the government, impacts to the national GDP and economy. You know, some fires to note: we had the Flat Top complex in 2011, but we also had over a 500,000 hectare fire up in Fort McMurray, the Richardson fire. We were modeling that fire and predicting, you know, 70 kilometers of spread. The incident management teams of the day challenged that and requested a rerun of the model because they disbelieved that that kind of rate of spread was possible. It turned out that was reality. That's exactly what happened. Other things started to show up, though. We had lots of flooding. So that year was followed by flooding. We then had a massive fire season in 2012, large fires across northern Alberta, followed again in 2013 with flooding in High River, Calgary, Canmore. Some notable fires in 2014. Again, it might look like a small fire year, but you know, we were looking at 1 in 400 year events occurring. And a neat thing with the oceans, there was this blob of hot, warm air over the Pacific Ocean that set the longest event on record for you know, consecutive 226-day elevated temperatures in the Pacific Ocean, and that had impacts that were seen on the land in both BC and Alberta. So when we look to the last, you know, 5-year period of my career here, it just continued to get interesting. We had the 2015 fire season with, again, fires across the north. We had the Fort McMurray fire, which was named the Beast by the community in 2016, some of the largest insurable losses on history. And then more flooding in 2017 in BC, but then BC experienced some massive fire seasons. And I would suggest the depressed fires we see in 2017 and 2018 on this graph may be a product of the pervasive smoke that blanketed the province of Alberta for those 2 fire seasons. So we may have had a dampening effect from our neighbors in BC. But we certainly knew it was on our doorstep. We saw some large fires in the mountains along the BC border. The Verdant Creek fire, the Kenow fire, you know, the fire through Waterton Lakes National Park, which consumed 38% of the park. And again, more flooding just recently in 2020, more flooding in Fort McMurray, Slave Lake, and Fort Vermilion. You know, so there's one more trend I'll add to this graph. Since 2007 to 2019, a recent paper that I've co-authored with Dr. Jen Beverly and a colleague, Elizabeth Chapman, we're looking at the percentage of the forest protection area that is exposed to fuels that would propagate large fires across the landscape. And we're seeing good alignment with that analysis and subsequent fire activity over that period. What you'll note in this graph is between 2007 to present, we've jumped from around 27% up to close to 50% of the forest protection area is exposed. So looking at wildfire impacts on timber supply, there are provisions in the Forest Management Planning Standard and subsequent plans that if a fire disturbance or other natural disturbance is greater than 2.5% of a forest management unit, it requires a annual allowable cut recalculation. And so looking at the forest management units that overlap the FMA areas of the province, that would require fires, 2,200 to 89,000 hectares in size in the boreal, or similar 6,200 to just under 30,000 hectares in the foothills and Rocky Mountains. What we can see is that those types of fires are becoming far more frequently. This is our extensive history since 1961 for the largest fire sizes that have occurred in the province in each of those years. And we see that we are now regularly exceeding those thresholds in the province. A recent study by Jiangli Wang and others in the journal Environment Research Letters is suggesting that larger fire sizes, greater area burned are the reality for not just Alberta, but other parts of Canada. And we certainly need to recognize this as we look to the future. So to conclude, I think that of all industry, forest industry has great capacity to embrace these challenges. I do believe there are tools and process mechanisms within forest management planning and policy that can be used, but they may require a bit of a tune-up. So I will leave it there. I welcome you to join my table this afternoon and talk about this challenge of changing fire regimes and the impacts on timber supply later this afternoon. So back to you.